And today's topic is emotional neglect. So I've spoken a lot about different childhood traumatic experiences, how we can come through to thrive. I've gone in depth into a lot of other aspects to childhood trauma. But now I'm breaking it down a little bit into little chunk sizes. Hi guys, my name is Toyin Okunuga. I'm the CEO of Hush to Roar, bringing out your inner child. So today I'll be talking about emotional neglect. It's very much linked to all the other traumatic events that happen in a child's life that can affect us as adults, and we actually have no idea that they affect us. So emotional neglect, can be either deliberate or not deliberate in terms of it being abuse. Emotional neglect is not necessarily an abuse, but the effect of it, if we're not intentional or deliberate in our actions, can lead to traumatic events later in life. So what are the things that we actually do that constitute emotional neglect? I'll just give a little example, and it's probably it might seem trivial to some, but it's amazing how our body, as children, we thrive, and then something just happens, and then if we're not attentive as parents, that could just linger on. So a child could come home and say a friend did ABC to them or did something horrible, call them names, and as parents we might just shove them off and think, oh, you know what, just get over it. So they're already starting to think emotionally their feelings don't count. And I put hands on her heart as well. I'm sure I've done something that's not as good in terms of me not being attentive to my children as I should be, unintentionally. But ever since I started my journey, I realised that we have to be more deliberate in our actions. So if a child comes home and says someone else did this to them, we have to be attentive. If we're not, then that constitutes to emotional neglect. And then it could build on. And what does a child do? They step away. They stop telling us things. And I think that's where it stems from, if we don't give them the emotional attention they deserve. So this is going to be a very, very quick one, because it's just a little sort of like teaser, or should I say reminder of how deliberate we should be in our actions. So yes, it's just that we should pay more attention to how the children are. It could be, the emotional effect could be the fact that they start to withdraw. They start to feel that their feelings don't count when we say, just go away, deal with it. So that could term as an unintentional emotional neglect. So there's a difference between emotional neglect, abuse, but also emotional neglect could be something very unintentional that we're doing as parents. So I'm talking about emotional neglect here. As parents, we so often forget that little things constitute to something bigger later on in life. Emotional neglect doesn't necessarily mean it's an abuse. It could be unintentional. But today, I'd just like to remind us as parents and carers, who are elders, just grown-ups, that we should be more deliberate in how we are to children or people that we're looking after, because it does have long-term effects. And what are the things that linger on? Say a child comes to us and just tells us something, we're so busy, we just say, go, 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 go. Well, they withdraw. They stop telling us things. And then we'll want them later on when they've already withdrawn because of the actions we've taken over the years. And what could that be eventually? It could end up in depression, anxiety, failure to thrive in school. If they're trying to tell us things that deeply affect them and we're not listening, it makes them actually perform worse than they should have done without even realizing. Aggression. So they start being hyperactive. They start showing some behavioral ways that we are not even thinking about. And we're saying, just shut up, what's that? But it's just that unintentional emotional neglect that we've demonstrated towards them that has led them towards that. So that we, as parents, as carers, people who work with children have to be a bit more deliberate in our actions, because all these constitute to emotional neglect later in life. And I've said things that actually could constitute to that would be a child coming back from school saying they were told to go and sit down and they didn't play a game, and we just shove them off to say, just go and sit down, it doesn't matter now, you're at home now. Or something, they're drawing, they were meant to score high and they drew well and they said they traced it. Rings a bell. Okay, so different things. It could start leading into aggressive behaviours. It could start leading into low self-esteem, stems from emotional neglect from parents, carers. And then that stems on, believe it or not, as they grow as adults, they then stop believing people. They start withdrawing from situations because of that emotional neglect. And as a child, they could start being uncaring or indifferent of situations. And what does that childhood neglect do to an adult? It does a lot. Because if they have that emotional neglect from a child, from a carer that they expect to look after them, they'll start to have that negative impression about life overall. And then people that have not even demonstrated that emotional neglect will almost seem to them that they have been neglected, start being paranoid sometimes, actually. They feel empty, anger, difficulty trusting people is a big one for me if we don't show emotional attention, intention, deliberate to children and we become adults. Emotional neglect is often intertwined with other things that are affected by children. So child abuse, sexual abuse, emotional, physical, everything. Emotional is way up there with all of those. But on a standalone, unintentional emotional neglect is not child abuse. It's just where we haven't been deliberate in our actions, in taking care, in making sure we listen to our children or people. And then we grow up as adults and believe that no one really cares. We're not even, we could sway one way or the other, and then PTSD, post-traumatic, disorder, stress disorder could step in, could get in as well. So this is a very short one. I just want to reiterate that myself, I'm growing too. I'm learning every day. Sometimes the kids teach us a lot, actually. And for me, when I hear a lot about mental illness and everything, it sits very close to my heart. And now, as a parent too, I try and be more emotionally attentive. And when I'm with a child or with someone, I'm in the now. So that's a big one because we're so busy. We're talking, we're eating, we're talking, we're eating. But now I've made a conscious decision that when I'm talking to someone, I don't have my phone. I want to be with you. I give you my full attention. And that's what I do with the children as well, most of the time. I must admit, writing the book was a different kettle of fish. But most of the time I stop what I'm doing and I face them and say, what were you saying? Let's talk, even if it's for 5 minutes. And then we get that emotional attachment in terms of deliberate action. So for me, it's just a little pointer to say, let's be more deliberate. Technology has brought wonderful things, but also it's brought things that makes us a little bit distant from our loved ones because we are on the phone, we're in a restaurant, we're talking, we're meant to be socializing. So I never look at my phone when I'm out and about in the restaurant or with the family, because that's where emotional neglect, that's the time that we can try and get their attention. So putting the phone down and giving them my full attention to be here and to be now with the kids is important, because emotional neglect, it starts to edge in from when we don't give them our full attention. So tonight is just a quick pointer to say, let's be more deliberate when we're talking to our children. When the children are talking to us, what hurts them, let's not shove them away because it stems into different mental problems. And it might sound trivial now, but it all builds up and it becomes our imprint, layers over time if we don't take deliberate steps to be emotionally present with our children, with our family, and as adults, and start to realize that they've had a traumatic experience. Their carers, their parents, or whoever was meant to look after them were emotionally unavailable. So thank you, guys. Let's be more intentional. Let's be in the here and now. Listen, talk, be attentive, so that we can be emotionally available to those we love, so that it does not stem into something that causes low self-esteem. So I love you guys. I love you. Remember, your inner child has a voice. Don't suppress it. Let it roar.